My family forgot my birthday and told me to cook dinner. Enough is enough. My 34th birthday is a milestone. Time to make a decision to live for myself. Turning to earlier pages, there were words, should I accept the offer from Chicago? Before starting, thanks for watching. Please subscribe to my channel. It means a lot to me. Let's dive into the story. Natalia Harper stood in the kitchen of her two-story home nestled in Collingswood, a suburb of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. The morning sun streamed through the windows, creating patterns of light on the polished countertops. Her dark brown hair was pulled back in a neat chignon, and she wore a navy pantsuit. As the assistant director of finance at Harrison Global, a large accounting firm, Natalie was known for her meticulousness and strong sense of responsibility. Her accuracy and foresight were highly valued by her colleagues. This morning, she had risen early as usual, prepared breakfast for her family, and just finished making sandwiches for lunch. "Mom, Rachel, breakfast is ready," Natalie called out as she arranged warm scrambled eggs and toast on the dining table. Footsteps came down the stairs, followed by her mother, Eleanor. Since losing her husband John to a heart attack 12 years ago, Eleanor had been working part-time in an administrative position. With her silver-grey hair cut short and not bothering to hide her tired expression, she reached for a coffee cup. "Thank you, Natalie," Eleanor said flatly. Her words carried more of an acknowledgement of routine than genuine gratitude. Natalie was used to this. After her father's death, she had naturally become the pillar supporting her family. Initially, she thought it would be temporary, but as time passed, it had become permanent. She covered most of the rent, groceries, utilities, and sometimes even personal expenses for Eleanor and Rachel. "Is Rachel still sleeping?" Natalie asked, glancing at the clock. It was already past 8. "Leave her be," Eleanor said, sipping her coffee. "She was out late last night." Natalie sighed quietly. Her sister Rachel worked at a local clothing shop, but most of her income went toward her own clothes, accessories, and dining out with friends. The Baker family finances essentially rested on Natalie's shoulders. Just then, Natalie's smartphone vibrated. The screen displayed an email from her boss. Today's meeting changed to 9 a.m. Important client attending. "I need to hurry," Natalie said as she stood up and grabbed her bag. "Tell Rachel I left breakfast for her in the refrigerator. And I'll be home a bit early today." Without looking up from her newspaper, Eleanor asked, "Why? Is something going on?" Natalie hesitated momentarily. "Not really," she began, then stopped herself. Perhaps her family was planning a surprise. She didn't want to ruin it. "Work should finish early today." "I see," Eleanor responded indifferently. "By the way, the refrigerator's acting up. Could you take a look at it?" "I'll check it tonight," Natalie answered as she headed toward the front door. Before leaving the house, she noticed a small red circle on today's date on the kitchen calendar. April 15th. Her birthday. While driving, Natalie took a deep breath. The truth was, she had a secret she hadn't told anyone. She had received a job offer from a major company in Chicago. The salary was 1.5 times her current one, with a significant opportunity for career advancement. For the past year, she had thought about this offer repeatedly, wrestling with the decision. Considering her family, leaving Philadelphia seemed difficult. But lately, she had been thinking more about her own life. How long would she continue living for others and putting herself last? Upon arriving at the office, her colleague Sophia Carter was waiting with a smile. "Happy birthday!" She handed Natalie a coffee cup. "It's a special cappuccino." Natalie returned a genuine smile. At least at work, her special day hadn't been forgotten. The afternoon sunlight streamed through the large office windows, gently illuminating Natalie's desk. She signed the last report and shut down her computer. Today, unusually, she had managed to finish all her work ahead of schedule. "Leaving already?" Sophia Carter looked up from the neighboring desk. "Yes, it's a special day," Natalie answered with a smile. Sophia Carter stood up, approached Natalie, and whispered, "Have you thought about the Chicago offer?" Natalie glanced around before nodding slightly. "I still can't decide. When I think about my family." "You always think too much about others," Sophia Carter said with a serious expression. "Isn't it time to prioritize yourself for once?" Natalie didn't respond to her friend's words, merely shrugging. Deep down, she felt Sophia Carter was right. However, her sense of responsibility and obligation to her family, cultivated over many years, wasn't easy to shake off. "Enjoy tonight," Sophia Carter patted her shoulder lightly. "It's your special day." "Thanks," Natalie replied with a smile. A small anticipation was growing in her heart. Last year on her birthday, Eleanor had bought a small cake from the supermarket. Rachel had given her an inexpensive card. It wasn't an extravagant celebration, but at least her family had remembered her birthday. At 5:30 p.m., Natalie parked her car in front of her home. The twilight gently embraced the residential area, and she could hear children playing in the neighboring yard. She took a deep breath and headed for the entrance. When she opened the door, she heard the television from the living room. "I'm home," Natalie called out cheerfully. Eleanor, sitting on the sofa, answered without taking her eyes off the TV. "Oh, you're early." "Yes, I wanted to come home early today," Natalie replied expectantly. She entered the living room and stood beside her mother. Eleanor was engrossed in her favorite quiz show and didn't look at her daughter. "Where's Rachel?" Natalie asked, looking around. "She went shopping with friends. Said she'd be back in the evening." Eleanor finally looked up at Natalie. "Do you need something?" Natalie hesitated slightly before answering. "No, just checking." She waited for mention of her birthday, but Eleanor had already turned her attention back to the television. "Mom," Natalie asked nervously, "don't you think today is a special day?" Eleanor tilted her head, thinking. "Not particularly." "Why, is something going on?" A small pain shot through Natalie's heart. Her mother had forgotten her birthday. "No, nothing," she replied, trying to maintain her composure. As she headed to the kitchen, Natalie tried to suppress her emotions. "It's not a big deal," she told herself. "Everyone's busy." However, she felt something heavy sinking deep in her chest. Never before had her birthday gone completely uncelebrated. Even if modest, her family had always acknowledged her special day in some form. Just as she opened the refrigerator to start preparing dinner, she heard the front door open. Rachel's cheerful voice echoed in the living room. "Mom, look. I found this super cute dress on sale." Natalie peeked out from the kitchen and saw Rachel hurrying toward the sofa, both arms laden with shopping bags. "Natalie, you're home early," Rachel said when she noticed her sister. "Perfect timing. What's for dinner?" "I'm starving." Natalie paused and turned around. "Today, am I cooking?" Her voice held a slight mixture of hope and question. "Of course, who else?" Rachel answered matter-of-factly. "Mom has her bridge club, and I'm going to see a movie with Jessica. The show starts at 8, so I'd like to eat early." Natalie was speechless. Not only had everyone forgotten her birthday, but they expected her to prepare dinner as usual. "But today is..." Natalie began, then stopped. "What?" Rachel said with slight irritation. "Nothing," Natalie answered quietly. She slowly returned to the kitchen and stood motionless in front of the refrigerator. Inside were neatly arranged fresh vegetables and meat, all stocked by her over the weekend. She placed her hand on the refrigerator door and sank into thought. Throughout her life, Natalie had sacrificed much for her family. After her father's death, she had just graduated from college but immediately started working to support the household. Rachel was able to attend university because of Natalie's support. Medical expenses for Eleanor, home renovations, everything had been covered by her. Despite all that, her birthday had been forgotten. Suddenly, a strong resolve sprouted in Natalie's heart. She stopped her hand that was about to put on an apron and quietly picked up her bag. Returning to the living room, she found Rachel and Eleanor each absorbed in their own activities. Rachel was trying on her new clothes, and Eleanor was preparing for her bridge club. "I'm going out for a while," Natalie announced quietly. "What? What about dinner?" Eleanor asked in surprise. "You'll have to manage on your own today," Natalie said without turning back, heading for the door. Her voice was calm, but it carried a strength that neither had heard before. "What's that about? How selfish!" Rachel's angry voice reached her back. "What are we supposed to do?" Natalie stopped and slowly turned around. In her eyes floated emotions she had suppressed for years. "I've lived for you all this time. Surely I can take some time for myself today." Eleanor and Rachel were left speechless, staring at Natalie. Their faces showed confusion and surprise. "What do you mean?" Rachel asked discontentedly. Natalie didn't answer. She simply opened the door quietly and took a deep breath of the outside air. The twilight sky was beautifully tinged with orange. She steeled her resolve and closed the door. Getting into her car, she took a deep breath. "It's time to go somewhere where I can find my own worth." Natalie started the engine and left the house behind. As dawn broke, the view of Philadelphia spread out from the window of a downtown business hotel. Natalie sat on the bed and picked up her smartphone. The call history showed more than a dozen missed calls from Rachel and Eleanor since last night. Several text messages had also arrived. Natalie sighed and replied briefly to the messages, "I won't be back for a while." "Don't worry." She took a sip of coffee and gazed out the window. Last night, as soon as she arrived at the hotel, she had emailed the HR representative of the Chicago company, "Is it still possible for me to accept your offer?" By the time she finished breakfast, a reply from the HR representative had arrived. "Of course it is possible. Let's meet." Natalie's mind was made up. Looking at the clock, she saw it was 10 a.m. At Harrison Global, they would be wondering about her absence. She made a call, explaining that she would be taking a few days off due to health issues. Her boss asked with concern, "Is something wrong?" But she simply replied, "I just need some time." Meanwhile, at Natalie's house, Eleanor and Rachel greeted the morning in a state of mingled confusion and anger. Still no word. Eleanor asked Rachel as she stood in the kitchen, brewing coffee that Natalie had stocked up on yesterday. "Just a short message," Rachel showed her smartphone. "I won't be back for a while." "Don't worry," she says. "What is this, some kind of novel?" "I wonder what happened," Eleanor said anxiously. "Did I say something strange yesterday?" Rachel shrugged. "Who knows? Maybe it's just Natalie being moody. Even most perfect gets stressed sometimes." But without her. Eleanor cut off her words and looked around the kitchen. "What about dinner? Why not order pizza?" Rachel answered simply. "She'll be back tomorrow, I'm sure." Natalie has hardly ever been away from home. Eleanor nodded anxiously. "I suppose." They still hadn't realized how significantly Natalie's absence would impact their lives. On the morning of the second day, Natalie was at her hotel, laptop open, preparing for her interview in Chicago. Suddenly, her phone rang. It was Sophia Carter. "What's going on? Are you okay? Your boss was worried." Natalie quietly explained the situation, about her family, her birthday, and her decision to accept the Chicago offer. "You finally made a decision for yourself." Sophia Carter's voice carried a sense of relief. "Actually, I've been waiting for the day you'd be free from your family's burden." "I wouldn't call it a burden." Natalie tried to defend. "Don't say that." Sophia Carter's voice was gentle yet firm. "You've been supporting them all this time, both financially and emotionally. But they've taken your presence for granted. This isn't a healthy relationship." Natalie fell silent at her friend's words. Sophia Carter continued. "Rachel is 28, right? That's old enough to be independent. And your mother needs to rebuild her own life instead of depending entirely on you. But can they manage without me?" "They will," Sophia Carter asserted. "People can change when necessary. They didn't need to change because you were always there." After the call ended, Natalie gazed out the hotel window at the spring sunlight illuminating the spaces between buildings. Her heart was a mixture of determination and anxiety. Meanwhile, Eleanor and Rachel faced an unexpected problem. Checking the mailbox, Eleanor found an envelope marked "Urgent" in red letters. Opening it, she discovered it was a warning for late mortgage payments. "That's strange," Eleanor said, looking confused. "Natalie always pays this. Maybe she forgot." Rachel responded indifferently. "But she's never forgotten before." Eleanor stared at the envelope intently. "Actually, I wonder if she's been paying all along." Rachel turned to her mother. "What do you mean?" "Every month, I gave her my share for household expenses, but..." Eleanor trailed off. "I never knew exactly how much everything really cost." Rachel rose from the sofa and paced around the living room. "But the house is in your name, right? So isn't it your responsibility?" Silently, Eleanor headed to Natalie's room. She opened the door without knocking and entered. In the orderly room, she approached Natalie's desk. The top drawer was locked, but the bottom one opened. Inside were neatly organized files of bills and payment records. Eleanor began checking them one by one: mortgage, electricity, gas, water, internet, loans for both cars, insurance. There was evidence that Natalie had been paying for everything. Eleanor was at a loss for words. It became clear that the share she had been giving Natalie each month didn't even cover half of the actual living expenses. While she was examining the documents, Rachel entered the room. "What are you looking at?" "Natalie has been paying for everything." Eleanor showed the documents with trembling hands. "If she leaves, we might not even be able to continue living in this house." Rachel wore an expression of disbelief. "Don't be ridiculous. That's surely an exaggeration. We work too, you know. Your income and mine combined wouldn't cover these payments." Eleanor's voice was desperate. We may have relied on Natalie too much." That afternoon, another shock hit them. Rachel's credit card stopped working while she was shopping. It said I'd exceeded the limit. Rachel returned home bearing anger and anxiety. "But that can't be right. It was just reset last week." Eleanor silently stared at the kitchen calendar. "Rachel," she said slowly, "have you noticed anything?" "What do you mean?" Rachel responded irritably. "This calendar," Eleanor pointed to April 15th, which had a red circle marked on it. "Is it some kind of anniversary?" Rachel took out her smartphone and opened her calendar app. A few seconds later, the color drained from her face. "Mom." April 15th was Natalie's birthday. They both fell silent. Only the sound of the living room clock broke the silence. "What have we done?" Eleanor finally spoke. "Natalie supported everything, and we even forgot her birthday." Rachel began to reflect on their behavior for the first time, taking Natalie's contributions for granted and always pushing the demands on her. "No wonder Sis is angry," she said in a small voice. At that moment, the doorbell rang. The two exchanged glances and nervously approached the door. When they opened it, a woman from the bank was standing there. "Are you Natalia Harper's family?" she asked in an official tone. "I'm Olivia Morgan, a loan officer from First National Bank. I'm here to discuss something important." Olivia calmly explained the situation. 3 months ago, Natalie had applied for a modification of the mortgage terms, but the signature of the title holder, Eleanor, was also needed. However, since they couldn't reach Natalie, the process had stalled. "Without the signature, unfortunately, we'll have to begin foreclosure procedures next week," she said matter-of-factly. Eleanor and Rachel were speechless. The reality unfolding before them was harsher than they had imagined. For the first time, they fully understood how dependent they had been on Natalie. And simultaneously, they realized how fragile their lives were now that she was gone. "We need to contact Natalie," Eleanor said with a trembling voice. Rachel picked up her smartphone and sent a message to her sister, "Sis, please. Come back. We can't manage without you." But there was no reply. A week had passed since Natalie left home. In a conference room overlooking Chicago's skyscrapers, she signed a contract. As she put down her pen, Michael Finch, the HR director sitting across from her, stood up and extended his hand. "Welcome to Bradford Investments, Natalie," Michael said with a warm smile. "Your experience and capabilities will be a great asset to our finance department." "Thank you," Natalie replied with dignity. "I appreciate the opportunity." Leaving the conference room, she stood by the window, looking down at the sprawling Chicago cityscape. Her salary was 1.5 times her current one, her position upgraded from assistant director to director. Above all, there was the satisfaction of having her abilities properly valued. However, thoughts of her family still lingered in her heart. Taking out her smartphone, she saw more than 10 unread messages from Rachel. The first few were full of anger and blame, but the recent ones had changed to a pleading tone. "Sis, please. Contact us. We're really struggling without you." Natalie took a deep breath and closed the messages. Sophia Carter's words came to mind: "You need to value yourself. It's not selfish, it's healthy self-preservation." Her appointment with a Chicago real estate agent was approaching. Natalie left the company to search for a new apartment. Meanwhile, at the Baker home in suburban Philadelphia, the situation was rapidly deteriorating. Electricity was partially restricted, hot water was barely available, and the refrigerator was nearly empty. "What should we do?" Rachel sat at the kitchen table, holding her head. In front of her were piled unpaid bills. My salary alone can't cover these. Eleanor silently gazed out the window. Neither can mine, she finally said. With just a part-time salary. The two fell silent. In the week without Natalie, their lives were on the brink of complete collapse. I contacted Natalie's colleague, Rachel said. They only said she took vacation. But one woman asked, haven't you heard about her job change? Eleanor turned with a surprised expression. Job change? Rachel took out her smartphone and opened a screen. I looked into it, checking Natalie's LinkedIn. She showed the screen to Eleanor. The profile had been updated. Bradford Investments, Finance Director, Chicago. Chicago. Eleanor's voice was trembling. She really intends to leave us. But why? Rachel was confused. Just because we forgot her birthday. It's not just a birthday, Eleanor said quietly. That was merely the trigger. She went to Natalie's room and began examining the documents again. From the back drawer, she found a small locked diary. There was no key, but considering the circumstances, Eleanor decided to open it. On the last page was written, enough is enough. My 34th birthday is a milestone. Time to make a decision to live for myself. Turning to earlier pages, there were words, should I accept the offer from Chicago? What about my family? The date was from a year ago. She'd been considering it for a year. Eleanor said in a small voice. Rachel leaned against the doorframe, watching her mother. But why didn't she say anything? We're family, aren't we? She couldn't. Eleanor closed the diary. Have we ever listened to her? Have we ever respected her wishes or dreams? The two sank into silence. For the first time, they were beginning to see things from Natalie's perspective. As a last resort, Eleanor stood up. Let's call Sophia Carter, Natalie's best friend. Rachel nodded and searched for Sophia Carter's contact on her smartphone. While the dial tone rang, the two waited with tense expressions. Sophia Carter's voice came through. Sophia Carter, this is Eleanor Harper, Natalie's mother. Mrs. Baker, Sophia Carter's voice was cold. What can I do for you? I desperately need to contact Natalie. I know she's moved to Chicago. There was a moment of silence on the other end of the line. Let me be honest, Sophia Carter said in a stern tone. Natalie has put her own life second to yours for years. She could have accepted the Chicago offer a year ago, but she declined, thinking of you. But when she discovered that you couldn't even remember her birthday, she reassessed her own worth. Eleanor had no words to return. She's not coming back, Sophia Carter continued. And you have no right to make her. Natalie has the right to live her own life. I understand, Eleanor answered in a small voice. I just want to apologize to her. On the other end of the phone, Sophia Carter sighed. I'll pass on the message. But don't expect anything. When the call ended, a heavy silence filled the living room. What do we do now? Rachel asked anxiously. We do what we can, Eleanor answered with a determined expression. First, I'll look for a full-time job. And you should apply for a better paying position too. Yes. Rachel pondered. But what about the house loan? The foreclosure. That might be unavoidable, Eleanor said in a realistic tone. We might need to move to a small apartment. We won't be able to afford luxuries. Rachel nodded silently. In her eyes, there was a determination she had never shown before. Eleanor headed to the kitchen and took out a video camera. As a last hope, let's send Natalie a message of sincere apology and gratitude. She set up the camera and sat down beside Rachel. Before pressing the record button, she took a deep breath. Natalie, we don't know if you'll ever see this, but... Eleanor began, fighting back tears. We took your value for granted. We've realized that without you, neither this house nor our lives can function. But more than that, losing you as a person is what hurts the most. Please forgive us. Rachel continued, also in tears. Sis, we're trying to change. We're not as strong as you, but we want to stand on our own feet. Please, be happy. After sending the video, for the first time, the two took a genuine step toward independence. Natalie's reply came 3 days later. The brief email contained an address in Chicago and simply said, if you want to talk, come next Saturday. When Eleanor and Rachel arrived at Natalie's apartment, it was in a luxury high-rise. With nervous expressions, they rode the elevator and pressed the intercom for the 15th floor. Natalie, who opened the door, looked tired but more confident than before. She was wearing a black pantsuit, and her hairstyle was new. "Come in," she said briefly. The living room overlooked Lake Michigan. Natalie prepared coffee, and the three sat at the dining table. "I saw your video," Natalie began quietly. "Natalie," Eleanor started, searching for words. "We're truly sorry. It's true that we took your value for granted. And we didn't respect your life or dreams, always pushing our own convenience." Rachel nodded. "Sis, we changing. I've started working at a new accounting firm. And Mom has started working full-time." Natalie quietly listened to their words. "I don't resent you," she finally spoke. "But I too have the right to live my life. I've devoted myself to the family all this time, but now I want to live for myself as well." "We understand," Eleanor nodded slightly. "What about the house?" she asked fearfully. Natalie took a deep breath before answering. "I'm starting a new life in Chicago. But I'll pay the mortgage for 3 more months. During that time, you two decide what to do next." These were harsh terms, but the two had no right to complain. On the train ride back, Eleanor and Rachel quietly discussed their options. "We need to find a small apartment," Eleanor said. Rachel nodded. "We'll manage." 6 months later, Eleanor and Rachel had moved into a small 2-bedroom apartment. Eleanor was working as a full-time receptionist, and Rachel was seriously continuing her job at an accounting firm. The two were maintaining a modest but self-sufficient lifestyle. Natalie was finding success in Chicago, surrounded by new friends. She had begun talking with her family on the phone once a month, sharing updates with each other. The relationship was gradually being repaired. On her birthday the following year, she received heartfelt cards and small gifts from Eleanor and Rachel. "We think of you every day. Only after you left did we understand your value. We're living on our own strength now, but we'll never forget our gratitude to you." Natalie smiled as she read the card. Her decision had been tough, but ultimately it had brought growth for everyone. Eleanor and Rachel had moved from dependence to independence, and Natalie from sacrifice to self-fulfillment. She gazed at the twilight from her Chicago window and took a deep breath. Sometimes, leaving can be the most loving act. And true bonds are nurtured beyond distance, Natalie thought with a quiet smile.